health also connects, because anywhere where we are uncomfortable with ourselves or dis-eased and not at ease with ourselves is where our health is truly challenged. And the more that you want to connect and open your channel, the more that you are connected with yourself. And as I've become moved into this, like, I've given up alcohol, I've given up caffeine, and people are like, oh my God, you must have no fun. And it's interesting because I was really actually thinking about it today. And I was like, I actually am more sentient than ever.
Welcome to the Cosmic Love Antenna Podcast. This podcast is meant to encourage you to connect within so you can share your light with the world. And now, here's your host, Harrison Ma.
Welcome, beautiful beings, to another episode of the Cosmic Love Antenna. This is your weekly installment of your inner connection to your outer expression, where I, your host Harrison, with the beautiful guests that I get the privilege, the honor of bringing on, help you pull back the layers restricting health, alignment, and love. And today is no exception of said episode. I have a beautiful being, a beautiful mystic to share with you today. But before I pass to her, I want to start, as I have had the habit of doing over the last couple of weeks, with some gratitude, with some love. I appreciate you for tuning into these episodes, to these shows that I am making. I'm having such a fun ride, and really your hearts, your love, your attention is what's making that ride possible. So thank you for tuning in. If you get some value out of this chat today, remember you can share it with a friend or a family member that you love very much. You can leave your feedback, your insights on Apple reviews or in Spotify reviews, and get it out there into the world. Before I throw to my partner in crime here today, I want to give you a quick intro of what we're going to get into today. My beautiful guest, Claudia, is an intuitive channel. She's a biohacker. She's a Lucia Light therapy worker. But as is the habit here on the show, she is a powerful and expansive, loving soul. With her today, I'm going to get into this concept, this ability, this skill that is intuitive channeling. Who and what is it? How can you start to tap into this powerful ability, the do's and don'ts, connection to healing, and so much more? Claudia, thank you for joining me today, and welcome to the Cosmic Love Antenna.
Thank you so much for hosting me. I'm very excited to talk about all the things that you mentioned.
It's so thank you for saying yes. And how I've been doing these shows with bringing guests on is when I first started the podcast, I had a big list of people, and you weren't on there, to be honest. But what I've been learning to do, and I think this is what you'd appreciate. I was editing a podcast one day, and you downloaded into my heart. I was like, oh, Claudia. I need to reach out to Claudia. We've talked back and forth before about many things. But there was something that came in. I was like, Claudia needs to share her beautiful voice. So I'm happy that you were able to pick up on that. Does that resonate at all?
100%. That's intuition right there.
Yeah, I love it. Claudia, I want to start here, as I always do on these shows. You know, I've had the pleasure of getting to know you. I know a bit about your background and the things that you do in the world, but people listening are new to your beautiful voice. So I like starting with a little bit of a background, but specifically, I like knowing and learning about your pain teacher, right? And the pain teacher is usually the event, or maybe the series of events that have led us to who we are today and the work that we're doing. So I'm wondering, if you could give a little bit of description of your journey, but maybe specifically about some of the events that have led you to, what you're doing today as the light that you are.
Oh, 100%. And I think it's so good to talk about those events so that people can relate to them, because we're all human beings, right? And we all have experiences. So I think one of the pain teachers I've had is growing up with immigrant parents. I'm a first generation American born in the United States of Mexican family. And I feel like I grew up with a lot of fear and protection and indoctrination. I was talking to a friend of mine and he was saying, we're so indoctrinated now with social media. And I was like, no, honey. I was like, we've been indoctrinated.
It's been going on for a while.
Yeah. So I think that growing up in a very difficult childhood, always feeling like the rebel and like I was here to break a lot of social norms for my family was one of my biggest pain teachers.
And Claudia, let me ask you a teacher. Let me ask you a question about that, which was a teacher. What your gifts that we're going to get into today, were they coming up in this indoctrination? Were they a part of some of the things that maybe were being pushed back against?
Absolutely. I grew up very Catholic family, and then
there it is. Yeah.
Yeah. And then even Mormon, and religion was really used as a way to control. And I was talking to someone else today and I said, I didn't know why, but I knew that it wasn't the way for me, that there was something more. And that was the spirituality and the intuition I was already starting to feel.
So thank you for sharing that, my friend. And I would highly encourage people listening to go back and listen to some of the episodes I've done with Shireen or Heather Tucker or Kim Vopney on specifically the relationship between the divine feminine, mystical gifts and the indoctrination that Claudia is talking about. One of these pillars being the religious, I don't know what you'd call it, the religious movement, the religious pillar, the religious, entity that, and not the mystical religious entity. Let me be very clear with my words. I'm talking about the man-made, in many ways, religious sort of structures that are there to, how do I say this nicely, restrict our expansion.
So, that's perfectly said.
Yeah. And so I'm wondering, Claudia, I'm interested, how did you break free of all of this? How did you, you're here now and we're going to talk about some of the things that you do, but how did you expand out of these chains in many ways?
Yeah, it's taken a long time. And I think that I still find myself going like, oh my God, that's from my childhood still, or from my family. But I think that when I was 27 years old, I took my first self-development class. And I realized that I had sworn off religion because it had been used to control me. But then I found Buddhism, and I would have never touched Buddhism because I was like, that's organized religion. And so I think I started when I was 27 to begin to explore sort of the self-development spiritual world. And that's really where I began to discover who I am really, and that it's safe to be me.
It's that 27 age frame of the, correct me if I'm wrong, Saturn Returns begins at 27 or is it 28?
Oh, I honestly don't know. But
I think it's that frame, 27, 28. My 30th birthday is coming up next month. And I know that shift that you're talking about very well. And I'm currently still in it myself. And I think if you're listening out there in the podcast world and you can maybe relate to Claudia, what she's saying, or maybe you're coming into it, this is not a Claudia thing. I think we all have a choice, right? We all get a choice. And this is a very big word here I want to underline. We get a choice within this age frame of leaning into more of ourselves, whether it is through Buddhism, whether it is through other sort of mystical, spiritual truths. There is a power that we're all connected to within inside of us that is lovingly pushing us to take a direction. And I think if we can learn to listen and learn to open ourselves up, that voice starts to become stronger and stronger, and the choice starts to become easier and easier to make. Does that make sense?
100%. Yes. And then your intuition becomes stronger and stronger. And then you connect to those higher intelligences that are available to us, which really is us at this. It's all one.
Yeah. Speaking of higher intelligences, my friend, let's get into now, the main crux of this episode I really want to help people with is get a better understanding of what, intuitive channeling is. And just to give a bit of context here, I think people have heard maybe on other episodes. I haven't shared this with you, my friend, but I'm actually doing a mystery school at the moment. I started mystery school about a month ago, and I'm actually, it's called Open to Channel, and I'm activating and on the path right now to just going deeper into my channeling connection and expanding that gift within inside of me. So I'm, other than wanting to just see your beautiful face and have a chat with you, that is one of the intentions of bringing you on, is just to have a chat around this so people can learn more about this innate gift that we all have. So let's start basic, my friend. I'm wondering if you can explain from your perspective, your experience, what is intuitive channeling?
Yeah. So I didn't want to call myself a psychic. I didn't want to say that I was only a channel. I'm not a medium, although I can connect to those who have passed. And so I had a tough time figuring out what to call what I do. And a friend of mine actually really said, put the two words together. So when I do a reading or a channeling for someone, it's a little bit of me being able to see, hear, and feel intuitive hits about a person. And then I shift and I move between myself and the higher intelligence I work with, which is called the collective. And they're super high in the, I don't know what you would want to call it, spiritual ladder.
Dimension.
Yeah, definitely. So sometimes I'll say things like, I'm getting this feeling that you paint. And then they'll tell me, yes, I've been painting. Look, and they'll bring out the picture of how they've been painting. And so, but that's me sort of getting an intuitive hit. And then the guides come in and say, this is why you've been painting, and this is why it's good for you, and da, 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 da. So when I'm channeling for someone, I will say, it's me talking right now. And then they'll know, and you'll hear when it's them talking.
Yeah. Ooh, so many little points here that I want to jump off on, but let me go back to one of the first things you said. And you said you tap into a collective. And I think people might be confused about this maybe, or maybe people are new to this, and they would expect that when you're tapping into something, I think Hollywood, I think this is going to be a repeated feeling throughout this chat. There's all this Hollywood, another form of indoctrination, right? This Hollywood indoctrination that we have of movies of people channeling a person, a singular being behind the person through their words, they're being taken over. And I think the first misconception we can start to break down here is, in my experience, and maybe you can tell me yours here, my friend, the higher we go up in the dimensions of beings, entities, frequencies, different states of love, the more it becomes a unity and group conversation, right? I'm yet to experience this. Maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, my friend, but I'm yet to experience, one person, one thing working by itself, right? There might be one thing talking, but there's a feeling that there's more there. Am I resonating and making sense?
100%. Yes. And I got to see the entities and the energies, and I like the word frequencies a lot, actually. I got to see the frequencies that I channel for the first time while I was having a Lucia Light session done for me. And they are not like us at all. Actually, it's interesting. I feel like the guides that I channel, the collective, are part of the Lucia Light work that we all do, that you and I do. Yep. And they were opalescent color.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because it's the colors I've chosen for my branding.
Yeah.
So without knowing, I'd chosen those colors, and that's what the beings look like.
Yeah. So the Lucia Light, we're going to get into this too for people that are new to that word. I would encourage you, again, if you're listening to this episode, I haven't released at the time of this recording, but when you're listening to this recording, it'll be out. A beautiful interview with our mutual friend, Alison Pellicer, talking about the Lucia Light and what is this powerful technology and the entity of it. So go back and listen to that episode. But Claudia and myself, we both use the light. I'm more myself using it personally now. I've shifted out of being a practitioner of it, but Claudia still uses it as a beautiful light worker with other people. And I would say, again, listen to the episode, but the light is a powerful gateway into the mystical worlds. And we're combining these two topics today. And maybe I'll ask your opinion on this, my friend here. The ability that Lucia Light has to open the door to the mystical world, and then the fact that we have this innate ability to channel, they go really well together. So I'm wondering maybe if you can explain, right, how you've seen the Lucia Light both with clients that you've worked with and with yourself enhance your intuitive channeling.
Oh, I'd love to talk about that because they really, really do go well together. So what I do when I begin to channel is I do some breathing and gentle body movement, because what I'm doing is changing my brain waves from beta down to alpha, all the way down to theta. And that is also exactly what the Lucia Light assists you in doing. When the light turns on and begins to work its magic through the flickering different programs that it has, it's entraining your brain into those brainwave patterns. And while I was doing sessions for people, I started getting all these intuitive hits. And then I would try to remember them all, and I couldn't. So I started writing them down for people. So now I do what's called automatic writing, channel writing, while people are under the light. Why I love this tool so much is because it really teaches people to be their own healer, because sometimes as I'm writing an intuitive hit that I'm getting, they're actually getting that same hit for themselves under the light.
So cool.
Very cool. Yeah.
So again, so many questions are bubbling up. Do you do sessions on yourself still, my friend?
I do. Yeah. I actually don't do as many as I used to, but I still do them. Yes.
Do you find it has become intense for you in terms of the channeling? So a couple of questions. One, I'm interested with that brainwave frequency element for people out there that may have experience with the Lucia Light or are interested in doing a session. Do you have a favorite session for inducing the kinds of frequencies that promote the channeling itself? Is there something that you like, or do you find it's really random in the moment?
I find that for me, when I do the light, I actually get to shut down all of it and just be very quiet. And it's almost like a quiet meditation for me, because I actually can hear sort of the channeling chatter almost all the time, particularly when I wake up. I'm getting download. It was mostly for other people, but now it's also becoming for me. So actually for me, when I'm under the light, it's relaxation. But for people, when I'm doing a session for them, it's like they get to open to their channel. So it's interesting.
Yeah. The opening to the channel, I guess we'll go there next, because I think this is a very important element to hit on here. And thank you for sharing the Lucia Light element, because we might come back to that and explain a little bit more. But again, I would encourage people to reach out to a practitioner near you, or even if you're near Claudia, do some work with her, because I think the 1-2 combo of the channeling with the Lucia Light is a very rare and not very utilized combination that most people have. But let's speak about opening the channel. So I think where a lot of people have another misconception here is, and I see this in myself, and I see this in people that do a lot of readings for people, and I think this is probably why you have an aversion with the word psychic, is that, and this is something I've started to learn about myself, is that we all have this ability to connect to these higher dimensions, these higher beings, these higher realities in which we can take divine truth from, and then have the opportunity to channel it or express it to the physical world. What we don't realize, though, is that if we have trauma, if we have shadows, if we have, all of these lenses of the human experience that we haven't moved through yet, or haven't integrated or haven't healed, then this divine channel and message, while in all of its purity is probably powerful and very loving, before it's shared with the world is now being filtered through these limitations, these traumas, again, and a lot of these aspects. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering your thoughts on this, my friend, and how we can learn to open the channel in a more pure way.
Yeah, that's a really great question. It's almost like all those traumas and all those they were showing me, I say they, the collective, they were showing me that they're like little sort of like, do you ever play Jenga? Have you guys ever
Yep.
where you pull the blocks out? It's almost like they hit a block and they can't get through to send a message.
It's a good image.
Yeah. So they were showing me it's almost like a block they can't get through, a block they can't get through. So the message is almost like broken or can't find its way to your vocal cords or your intuition or your heart. Yeah. So how to open that channel?
What do you do, Claudia? What do you practice to help with that?
Yeah. So my channel actually began to open up a lot more during COVID. I discovered channeling with Esther and Jerry Hicks. I read the book. I had a random channeling in Australia. My first channeling was in Australia. And I was just like, this is it. I want to do this. And I was 20 years younger, and I tried to channel. I tried and it just, I wanted to do it, but it's almost like attachment is the biggest block to manifestation.
Expectation, right?
Yeah. And then during COVID, I did a 30-day breath and yoga workshop because I had the time. So every day I would get up and I would do the workshop. I would do breath work, and the next day we would do yoga. And something started to happen where when the class was over, I wouldn't get up. I would just sit there and all this energy would start flowing through my body. And then one day, who I was dating at the time, I managed to say, get the phone, something's going to happen, and to record me. And I started pointing, but I was still in sort of this zone. And wherever I pointed, a bird would appear at the window. And so I knew something was opening. So for me, anytime I do breath work, it doesn't have to be extreme. It's just a gentle slowing down of the breath and a little bit of movement. They know, I know, my vessel knows, oh, it's time. Let's do this. Let's go. Yeah.
So the breath, from what I'm picking up from what you're saying, my friend, the breath opens the channel, and it allows not just for, this is why people do breathwork therapies to help them move through trauma, move through pains from their past that they're helping to integrate. The breathwork shifts and helps the body start to release and express. It not only does that, but it also sounds like, from what you're saying, is it clears the channel, your little antenna, your receptor, to receive the message in a pure way without distortion. Is that correct? Did I pick it up?
Yes, absolutely. And I also always pray before I channel. I pray to only have the highest of beings come through, only with good intention, only the messages that are for the highest good of the person, and that they come out in a way that is understandable to them, that is helpful to them, practical, one could say.
Thank you for answering that, Claudia. What's your relationship with shadow work on this topic? Do you think, so this is just to share a bit of my experience here. So my tool that I've been using at the moment to help me expand my channel and receive the downloads in a pure fashion is shadow work. And I've been really looking at a lot of triggers. I've been really looking at my inner child. I've been looking at, ancestral elements with my parents. And I've found that, and I'm in it right now. So a lot's coming up and a lot's moving, and I'm seeing some things shift. But the shadow work itself is a tool that we can all apply, from what I'm gathering. I'm wondering what your relationship with that is.
Oh, I don't think our shadow work is ever done. And I embrace it. I call it going through the eye of the needle. It's like you're trying to go through the eye of the needle, and it's painful. But once you get through the other side, it's like, oh, thank goodness. Phew, that's gone. That's cleared. That's healed, And even recently, I had been doing a lot of plant medicine as a way to do some shadow work. And I went to a brain training institute in Sedona. And during that brain training, and
what's it called, Claudia? What's the institute called?
Biocybernaut. Yeah. So I was there, and I realized I had been getting a little bit of spiritual superiority, because I was like, oh, look at me doing all this
spiritual ego.
Yeah, I was getting some spiritual ego, and I got smacked down. But I don't see it as a bad thing anymore. I'm like, oh my God, thank you. I was grateful to see that, because I don't want to have that cloud how I'm serving.
Yeah. Well, and Claudia, and I think you probably realize this, but also just for the listeners, that gratitude, that love, that thankfulness for the aspects that you're looking to integrate and heal is how we heal them, right? We don't integrate the shadow into the light by pushing or adding more tension and resistance to the things that we've brought awareness to. We see the trigger, we see the spiritual ego, we see the trauma, we see the quote unquote mistake that we've made in the past, and we unconditionally forgive it. Right? We forgive it, accept it, and that is what integrates it and brings it into life. Because what we have to remember is that element that we see now in a space of separation at one point helped us. Right? At one point was created to help us be our best selves. Right? Was one point there to protect us, one point there to help us learn, one point there to help us through that toxic relationship, whatever it is. So that is really what. And Claudia is just beautifully highlighting that this is how we bring those aspects into the wholeness to allow the channel to express itself in its highest potential.
100%. Definitely. Yeah.
Claudia, I love you very much, and I'm enjoying this chat. It's getting me going. I want to ask you a bit more now about some of the ways we can express some of the ways that the channel that moves through us from the collective, from the higher sources, the higher selves, the higher entities, divine source. What are some of the ways that the channel can express itself? Because this is another misconception that apparently is a big part of my intention here today, of that, again, we look at Hollywood or maybe some of the other resources. We think of channeling as I'm suddenly taken over, my eyes roll back into the back of my head, and I have this booming voice move through me. And, while there are some elements of truth in there in terms of channeling a voice, I think there is a bigger range in which we channel higher frequencies. So what does it look like in your human experience, and what are your thoughts on this?
Oh my gosh. I think that it's so diverse, and it's so wonderful to see all the diversity. There's Esther Hicks, who her voice does change, but throughout the years, it's almost as if the channeling that she's done and her has become one. And then there's Cindy. Oh my gosh, I can't think of her last name right now, but she's one of my favorite channels. And she just talks like there is no shift. There is no change. It is just her always talking, and it is the guides that she's always channeling. And then there's, there's another channel. I can't think of his name right now, but I can see his face. But he whispers, he hears what he's channeling, he whispers it, and then he says it out loud. So there's so many different ways. And then one of my dear friends, who's local, is a channel. She's a tiny little Filipino woman. And when she channels, her voice does become very deep and very big, which is so funny because I feel like she doubles in size just by the sound of her voice when she channels.
And I'm sure you feel something too, right? I'm sure a frequency shifts, correct?
There is a frequency shift, and it is all love. It is just pure love. Yeah.
So you're reading my mind, my friend. That's actually the point that I was going to get to. I'll pause it because I do want to share it, but I want to, just before I forget, I want to hit on, so we're just talking about the voice, but you also were just telling me about the writing that you share with people. Right. So there's other, and I want to explain this to people because I want people to detach themselves from the expectation that their channel is going to be a voice speaking through them. It may well be. And, from what I'm learning and understanding, it can be a big part of it, but it's not the only part. And it can come through you in many other ways. So talk to me about the writing piece that you connect into?
I absolutely recommend to all of my clients that they should journal. And I teach them to please make it in the most loving, delicious way. Like, everybody who knows me always sees me with like decorative journals and beautiful stationery and colorful pencils. So I always teach everybody to do everything with lusciousness, like just make it yummy for yourself. So find a notebook, find a pencil, or pen. I love hearing the scratching of the pencil on the paper when I'm channeling for people. But I find that writing is one of the best ways to channel, because I found that the more that I only talked the messages, they sort of almost evaporated and disappeared in the moment that we talked about them. Yeah. But if you're journaling and you're writing, it's a reminder. It's teaching your muscles and your body and your eyes to connect to the message that's coming through and that's on the paper in front of you.
And so thank you for sharing that, my friend. I would recommend, on top of what Claudia is suggesting, in the writing process, and I teach a little bit about this in regards to connecting to your inner child, I would also try and get out of the mind, because the mind here, the thinking ego mind, which is a beautiful part of us, needs to be loved much like any other part, but it needs to see its limitations. And we've talked in this chat thus far about the programs and the institutions and the systems at play that restrict beautiful gifts like this one. And unfortunately, a lot of those programs, a lot of those systems at play hold itself in that ego mind. So when you are in this writing, for example, it's very important to free write, free form, right? If it means writing with your non-dominant hand, right? If it means, maybe not writing with a pen, writing with some pencils, some colored crayons, right? Do all you can to make the writing process open and intentional rather than restrictive and sort of, I need to do it this way. There is no way, there is your way, right? So create the container for it to express itself in that form. Does that resonate, my friend? Do you agree with that?
100%. That's why I try to tell people, make it so that it's like nurturing to you versus like, I have to do my homework now and pull out my paper. That I never write on lined paper. I have reams and I just write on free form paper all the time.
The other piece, Claudia, and I want to get back to the love frequency here in a second, like I promised, but just before I do, you also mentioned art. And I think that is another form in itself. While the journaling could turn into an artwork, I also want to plant the idea that, artistic expression can also be a gateway to the channeling coming through, right? So artistic expression through the form of dancing, expression through painting, expression through singing, expression through, you get the idea. So I think if you are listening to this and you already have a substantial artistic habit or artistic hobby, you're a couple steps ahead, right? So now if you add in the channeling and the receptivity, this now becomes a portrait or a canvas to, hold more of this intuitive download. Does that make sense, my friend? Do you agree with that?
Yes, I was actually channeling for a client the other day, and they asked me, how do I do what you do? And I'm like, no, you won't. You will do what you do. And she was an artist. And I was like, I can see you painting like pet portraits forever. And I saw this, like the guides showed me like painting after painting after painting. And I was like, wow, like you would be so successful. And it just took off for her. So that's her expression in channeling.
Yeah, I love it. And I hope we're getting the impression with what Claudia is beautifully sharing is that this is much like every other aspect of your holistic health, is a beautifully biochemically individualized conversation, right? And the way that Claudia channels, the way that I channel, yes, there will be some frameworks and some similarities, right? We are a part of a collective consciousness, but how those similarities end up sort of diversifying outwards is going to be through your unique nuances. So it's important to recognize that. Speaking of spreading outwards, this is the last piece I'll add here on this, and I want to jump to another question for you, my friend, is the part of the channel that is the frequency. And I would actually assert, this is what I want to get your opinion on, I would actually assert from both what I'm learning and what I'm experiencing that the frequency is the base, right? And let me explain what I mean by this. When we tap into these higher dimensions, vibrations, groups, entities, collectives, higher selves, God, consciousness, all the things, and we bring that frequency vibration back, I would ask you the question, what is the base state of that frequency and vibration? Well, to me, in connection to the name of this podcast, it is love. So if people have told you that, and I say this to the listeners, if people have told you that when you walk into the room, or when you use your voice, or when you do your dance, or when you write your words, that the people around you feel a deeper sense of loving connection, I would actually assert that you're already starting to channel, right? Because you're now, through the heart space, starting to channel the frequency of love. Am I resonating, my friend?
Yes, absolutely. And it is love. And I see actually the word love written everywhere, like graffitied on walls, written on the ground. And I know that when I see it in the world, I'm connected. And it could be on a walk that I see it, Yeah.
And this is the next question I want to ask you, my friend. And this is, I think we'll set it up. This is, I think, step number one is, being in that frequency more and more, right? So going into meditation, maybe connecting to your guides, connecting to your higher self, the collective consciousness, and embodying that love, right? So connecting into it in the meditation, and then embodying it within it, and then stepping out of the meditation and continuing that. So I'm wondering, my friend, based off this, what are some ways that we can start honing this channeling ability? What are, in your opinion, your experience, how can we start opening up our channel, some practical ways?
So I love in the morning, as I'm driving to work, to start to feel gratitude, or sometimes before I head out the door. Gratitude is a huge one. And one of the things I started doing was every time I got an intuitive hit, I would be like, oh my God, thank you. I'm so grateful. Thank you guys for opening me up and seeing this and feeling this. And then I would move on to just being grateful about things in my life, or being grateful for the beautiful sunrise that just came up, or grateful for having a wonderful conversation with one of my best friends. And the more I'm inside of the feeling of gratitude, the more that channel does open and love starts to pour through gratitude. It's so yummy.
And it's so accessible for each and every one of us to do all the time. For many reasons, but I think a lot of us forget to be grateful. We're constantly looking ahead. Right? I was just talking to a client about this a couple of days ago. It's so important to be doing the thing, doing the healing, doing the expansion, doing the loving, and taking steps forward. But it's also important to sit in the moment, look at how far we've come, and be grateful for the things that we currently have, right? And and sounds like what you're saying, my friend. Not only does this help us feel, expansive and healthy and in alignment, but it starts to open up this channeling ability as well.
Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So other than gratitude, what are some other ways that you sort of hone this? So this is now me asking you as a person from my perspective of, so I'm definitely doing the gratitude piece. I'm trying to be mindful of it. I go into a daily practice every day where I open myself up. I bring in some of my guides, some of my masters, and start connecting. What are some other ways we can start flexing this muscle? So, for example, something that I've started to do is I've started to tone and really start to chant intuitively in that meditative space, and just to see what comes out of my voice. Is this something you'd recommend, or do you have other views on this?
Oh, I think that's a great way, because I feel that that was one of the hardest things for me to overcome, was trusting the words that would come out as a channel. And so toning is a beautiful, wonderful way to start to get that. I tend to sort of sigh a lot and just go, I am very vocal about my emotions. So yes, using your vocal cords to just practice and vibrate that fifth chakra. And then the intuitive part that also helped me trust the voice that would come out was when I was doing hands-on Reiki in the beginning. I was afraid to say the different things that I saw and heard as an intuitive person. So one thing I suggested, and this will also help bring your vocal channel out, is if I saw something, I'd be like, so I might not be right, but I'm seeing this right now. Do you connect to that, so that I could begin to trust my intuition and hear myself saying those things?
Yeah. And I also like the way you said that. You're creating a space for you to speak the thing that needs to be spoken, but you're also respecting the boundaries of the other person that's receiving it. Because I think that is another limitation and block and piece of resistance that a lot of us have. We fear that if we share the things that are moving through us, the other person will take it incorrectly, or take it as an offense, or maybe think we're weird, or all the things. And what you said, it was very respectful, right? You didn't force yourself. You just said, hey, this is and they're in your container already, so that helps. But you also you asked permission rather than sort of forcing the thing moving through you on them.
Right. What if, I could pick up on very personal things, and I'm like, whoa, what if they're not ready to handle this or talk about this? Or what if it's too tender?
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's the next thing I wanted to ask you, my friend. So we just talked about some of the positive and the do's to start promoting this, connection. What are some don'ts here? So you just gave one example, not really projecting, and not, if there is something sensitive coming up, really being mindful of how we share that sort of information. What are some other sort of, don'ts or things we should be cautious of as we start to hone this skill that we have?
Yeah. So I never give, I have tons of friends, and the intuition is always on. And like I said, in the morning, I'll start to get downloads and downloads of information. And I will always ask permission before giving anybody any intuitive insights that I've had. And I will just ask, is it okay? Do you want to hear this? And I've had people say no. And I completely respect that and understand that. And so I won't give the information, or I will see something and I will hear they're not ready to handle this yet. So you have to just let it go and know that if they're ready, they'll ask you about it.
Yeah. And it's I think a part of it is respecting their divine connection, right? And that there is, even if they're unconsciously aware of it and they haven't tapped into it yet themselves, and this is, we're going to go a little bit deep here if we haven't gone deep already. The source that you're getting the information from, and the information that you are having the feeling of sharing with them, is also the same source that is inside them, connected. And despite their level of understanding, despite their maybe unconscious state that they're in around it, it is still inside of them. So if that other aspect of the oneness is ready to receive it, you need to trust that will give the person the sign that they are, or the sign that they're not. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yes. It's a difficult line to follow, but sometimes I'll get I'll get a hit, and then I'll say, oh, I don't know if they're ready to handle this, but then I'll just say, is there anything else?
Yeah.
And if they're ready, then they choose to ask and to talk about it and to get guidance on it.
Yeah. I love it. At the very least, even if you don't share anything, think of the practice that you've had with just tapping in and receiving and holding that information within yourself, right? Just the fact that you haven't pushed it away, you haven't, leaned into your programming and thought, oh, what is this? What is this, woo-woo stuff that's coming through? The fact that you're just holding it and accepting it within yourself, that's still doing something, right? Even if you don't share it, it's still expanding you. right?
And then.
Yeah. Let's shift here again, my friend. And I want to hit another wave of misconceptions here. And I think how I want to start this is, you spoke about this before, and I want to get a definition, your opinion on this. What is the difference between channeling, so the things that we've been talking about thus far, and mediumship?
Yeah. So channeling is, I think, different because it's not only connecting to those that have passed. There's the frequency of the quantum field and the intelligence that is in that field. Are the ones who have passed there? Yes, absolutely. And sometimes they will come through, but I don't go in with the intention of connecting to those who have passed. And I think that mediums are more specific in going in with the intention of connecting to those that have passed.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful distinction, my friend. I think that makes perfect sense. And it's exactly what we've been talking about thus far. Channeling can include connecting to entities, beings, but is also not, exclusively that. It's, the frequency, it's the sound, it's the creative acts, it's the writing, it's all of it. Where mediumship, like you said, I think it's a specific, relative past loved one entity itself, which brings up the next question. And I think this is a fear that people have around channeling and a misconception, this idea of being taken over, being taken over by something, someone, some, entity, and this concern that we have that despite our best interests, our best desires, that if we start opening up this, and I think a big part of this comes from, unfortunately, the religious programming and a lot of the religious paradigms. If we start opening up this ability that we invite negative entities in that we may or may not be able to control, and they'll suddenly direct us like a zombie. So I'm wondering your thoughts on this.
Yeah. Well, if you're working on becoming a channel and moving in that direction, you're most likely, as we have already mentioned, doing shadow work, doing breath work, raising our vibration, setting our space, setting our set and setting. And I definitely have a very spiritual, sacred space where I do my work out of that. I have, force fields set around my house that raise the vibration of my building to over 500 in the power versus force sort of scale of consciousness. I have Ganeshas everywhere because he is one of the guides that protect me and work with me. I have crystals, I have sprays. And the other day I did see some negative entities hanging around. And then I laughed because I heard, the Lucia Light's going to just get rid of those real quick. So I turned the light on to fill the space with light, and they were gone. They were like, oh yeah, forget it. This is the wrong house. Let's just go.
So so first of all, thank you for sharing, my friend. I'm hearing a lot of parameters and protections that you have in place. But what you said at the end there, I want to just unwind a little bit. And the first thing I want to say here around this fear of evil entity is that I would actually say that evil is the wrong word. I think we need to use positive and negative. We live in a universe of polarity. And again, I think this is a big part of the religious indoctrination, that we have this idea that a negative entity is also satanic and evil. And it is not, in my experience, that is not the way it is. There is just positive and negative, and there is just attraction, right? So if we hold, so in your example, if quote unquote, if there is darkness, then more darkness will be attracted to the darkness. But as soon as we add in light, then the darkness does not need to be there anymore. It's not the fact that it's just become, it's dropped its evil nature. No, it's because the polarity of the environment has changed. So the natural state of the negativity is not attracted to the environment anymore. So it moves away, right? Am I resonating with what I'm saying?
Right. Or it transmutes into positive. Yeah, because sometimes that lower vibration needs help, is asking for help. It doesn't know how. Yeah.
Yeah, so important, because like this is where we get stuck, right? We get stuck in that demonic evil nature, and that puts us in a state of fear, which in itself becomes an attractor for more of those states. So we need to see. And I'll make this simple here. So if we are noticing the entities, right? If we're noticing these thought forms, let's use that as an example. Then one way to start pushing these things away, other than all those parameters that you set before, is we can look at that space within us that's holding on to that darkness that's attracting the entity, and we can bring it into the light, right? How can we do that? Well, we've already talked about it today, right? We can start to forgive. We can start to unconditionally love. So now the darkness is filled with light.
Right. Questions are always great. Why are you here? What are you trying to teach me? How can I help you? How can I help myself? Questions are a beautiful access to moving away from fear and into curiosity and assistance. Instead of resistance, there's assistance.
Yeah, and it's raising up on that. You dropped David Hawkins. That curiosity is raising us up that scale, right? The Hawkins scale of consciousness. Claudia mentioned it, Power versus Force, or I think the other book is The Power of Letting Go by David R. Hawkins. It's a good resource to look into what we're talking about. I love it, my friend. A deep dive on entities there, but I think it's an important one when we're talking about this conversation. I want to shift here now and probably hit on one of the last topics I want to talk about with you. And it's this idea of, okay, I understand all of this. I'm excited to start, connecting into my channel and expanding my light, and maybe receiving entities or connecting into my artistic expression, my light language. How does this all now impact our health, right? And I think we can feel like this is an isolated part of ourselves. We can feel like, on the weekends, I go see Claudia and I channel light language, but then throughout the week, I'm having my celery juice, I'm intermittent fasting, and it's like a separate part of me. I'm wondering, my friend, what is the connection here, in your opinion?
It's a beautiful question. And I think it's an excellent connection. Just as much as the light connects with the channeling, health also connects, because anywhere where we are uncomfortable with ourselves or diseased, not at ease with ourselves, is where our health is truly challenged. And the more that you want to connect and open your channel, the more that you are connected with yourself. And as I've become moved into this, like, I've given up alcohol, I've given up caffeine, and people are like, oh my God, you must have no fun. And it's interesting, because I was really actually thinking about it today. And I was like, I actually am more sentient than ever. Like, I feel so much more than ever. I enjoy so much more than ever. And not saying that they're bad and that you shouldn't do them, but I feel like giving up caffeine was one of the hardest ones for me, actually. Giving up those things that I thought were assisting me and helping me, like caffeine, were actually dulling me. And of course, affecting my health. I actually enjoy life so much more now, in such a simpler way, without having to seek out alcohol or caffeine or stimulation
You start to tap into the reservoir of power and energy and spiritual potential that's inside of you. How I explain this, and it's the name of the podcast, is that we are a cosmic antenna of love. And what I mean by that is there are two main sections, and I do this in my coaching. There are two main sections of an antenna system, right? There is the inner frequency that is being expressed through it and out of it. And then there is the external structure of the antenna, which supports the extension of that frequency, right? Which helps that frequency channel out into the cosmos. Both parts impact each other. So in this conversation we're talking about today, by opening up our ability to channel, to go to these spaces, to have the divine love, the divine connection, the divine consciousness, the group consciousness, we bring back that divine love and then channel it to share it with others. It's not just, we're not just bringing it back to share with others, we're bringing it back to share with ourselves. And once that spiritual connection has been made, we are holistic beings, right? So now it starts to reverberate through the physical structure. And now it starts to go both ways. And I want to hear your input on this, my friend. The spiritual now starts to impact the physical being. And then in turn, when we get energized by that, the physical being, the choices that we make from a physical perspective, the food, the movement, the sleep, the water, then in turn impacts the expression of that spiritual nature. Does that resonate, my friend?
Absolutely, 100%. Especially if you're in the zone of gratitude and you're doing your gratitude, you're releasing all of these chemicals and hormones in your body because you're moving out of those brainwave states that are creating the hormones of stress, and you're moving into, gratitude, love, oneness. And so your body's like, ooh, it's time to make all the good stuff. It's time to make the hormones that heal, the hormones that restore, and the chemicals and the, nootropics. And so you just become your own pharmacy for health and improvement and wellness.
And it going full circle here, you wonder why there's indoctrination around this, right? You wonder why that there are systems at play stopping you from discovering this, right? Because when I imagine a world full of people that have discovered that truth, then now not only is there a world not dependent on pharmaceutical medications, external practitioners and doctors, and don't get me wrong with these words here. These are powerful spaces and places that have a role to play, but they should be secondary to our internal force, right? They should be secondary, not primary, right? So you look at the religions, you look at the education system, you look at the farming, you look at the big food, and you start to see, that's why these systems are at play, because they're helping me be unconscious to this potential within.
Yes, to be dulled. Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Claudia, as I've said, I've thoroughly enjoyed this chat, and it's lighted me up as I expected. And I have a couple more questions here before we finish. I want to be mindful of your energy. I have one that's sort of just a curiosity, and maybe people listening have the same curiosity. What are some of the entities that you've channeled? So, for example, I often connect to my higher self, but I'm also within my mystery school at the moment. It's governed by 33 ascended masters. So I'm actively connecting and attempting to connect and bring in and channel this set of specific ascended masters. So I'm wondering, in your experience, what kinds of entities have you connected to?
Yeah, that's a great question. So definitely my higher self, connect to that. My inner child is another that I connect to. Love that little girl more and more every day, which I'm sure you can relate to. And so the other day I was having a Lucia Light group session, because I went to California with Allison and Jenna, and they hosted sort of a deepening understanding of the Lucia Light. I rarely get to have someone do a session for me, so it was quite special. And while I was under the light, that's when I saw the collective beings that are called the collective, or the guides that work with the light. And like I mentioned, they're like these opalescent, beautiful, like crystalline beings. And then while I was in Sedona, they started seeing a brain pattern in my brain that indicates that I can see angels. And so it was interesting, because I did see an angel while I was under the light, but it wasn't anything like you would think of as a typical angel. Kind of looked like macrame. I don't know if you know what macrame is, but it's that beautiful, like sort of weaving of yarn. So it looked like a beautiful piece of macrame, but it was an angel. And I heard, try and explain this to people. And I was like, well, I guess I don't know how to, and the best word I could come up with was macrame.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just a beautiful piece of like sort of art weaving yarn that just looks really pretty. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. The angelic realm, or the angelic, I don't know what you'd call it, the angelic layer of reality is one I'm leaning into more and more at the moment. And again, another religious layer that we need to move away from is that angels are not just in the world of the Bible or religious texts that you may or may not connect to. There is a whole other layer of reality just dedicated to these kinds of entities that I'm starting to learn about, and that sounds like another show, another podcast episode for another day, my friend, that we could get into in the weeds of all that. But so I have one more question for you, one more special little question. But before we get to that, I want to give you the opportunity now, my beautiful friend, if people have connected to your voice, the things that you do in this world, the intuitive channeling, the bit of it, we've talked a little bit about the Lucia Light therapy that you offer. I'm wondering what you would like to share with people listening to maybe connect with you, reach out, some of your services, what comes up?
Oh, sure. So I do Zoom channelings. I do offer sessions over Zoom that I set aside an hour, and then as long as the guides would like to talk to the person, they up to that hour. So I do that. And then I also host sessions at my house with the Lucia Light and channeling that way. And then the most exciting thing that I'm co-creating right now, which I'm thrilled to do, is group light and sound baths. So I am partnering with a couple of crystal bowl practitioners, and we will be doing group sessions with the Lucia Light and the crystal bowls. So to find out how to connect to that, you can go on my Instagram, which is part of my first name, CLAU_MORIEL. Or you can email me my full name, Claudia Moriel @mac.com. I'm working on my website. It's not ready yet.
It's incoming. It's incoming. And just as always, beautiful souls listening, if you click on your podcast player, go to the show, the details, the description, you'll see all of Claudia's details, her Instagram, and ways to reach her there. So that is another way you can connect. Claudia, I love you very much. Thank you for spending time with me today. I want to, speaking of love, where I finish this episode, usually with most guests, is, I ask you the question of, how do you define love? What is the definition of love to you? And you had the beautiful idea of not only answering this question, but you wanted to channel this question for me and the answer to it. So I'll throw it to you, and I'd love to ask you, my friend, how do you define that love word?
Oh, that's so awesome. Okay, so I'm going to move into that sort of space. And they have been here already, and it is already time to speak about this topic. And we have been listening to you and divinely enjoying the topic and the conversation, because truly it is here what we are to teach. When clients come to see you, dear son, and to see this child as well, really, we are helping them connect to love. We are very saddened when people do not feel the total love of who they are and the divinity that they are, because you are all very special and are part of us as much as we are part of you. And really what we would like to say is that the more that you heal, the more that you can connect to this love. Love is divine and love is available. It is about removing the blocks, as you have mentioned, to connect more to it. It is as if it were a pool which is available to you to drink from. So please find the ways in order to connect to this more, and life will be just a wonderful experience. Do not hold back, which you do very well, of expressing love to one another. Do not be afraid, as you are not, to say, I love you, because it is a wonderful vibration to speak. So thank you for having this podcast and, as you like to say, spreading the love. And we hope that people can begin to remove themselves from the idea of romantic love, because we feel this is what sometimes keeps people from expressing to one another that they love each other. There is sometimes a little bit of fear. Ooh, if I say I love you, will they think that I want to be in relationship with them? Not always. And it is also a beautiful way to let someone know that there is deep and wonderful and great care for one another. So we hope that this helps to enlighten on the topic of the definition of love, because we could endlessly speak about it forever and never reach the depth of what it truly is. It is a feeling, an expression. So please enjoy and share. Thank you.
So just so people know, I want to share something here quickly. So Claudia sort of sprang that on me as we got on the call this morning and said, "Hey, I have this idea." And as soon as she suggested, I had the idea in my head prior, but I had forgotten about it, and she reminded me, and it was just very unexpected that you shared you wanted to do that, Claudia, from your end. But that was beautiful, my friend. And not only was it, I hope, informative and a beautiful example of what we've been talking about through this whole conversation today, just for me personally, it was a beautiful affirmation for, the work I'm doing in the world, why I'm doing this podcast, doing these episodes, and getting to connect with powerful beings like you. So thank you for sharing that, my friend.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for the love and the light that you share in the world. It's been wonderful being your friend.
Well, I can't not invite you in, my friend. And just a quick question here, because I know this is different for everyone. Do you remember what the channel is when it comes through you, or do you black out?
Do. Sometimes I black out, but not too often, but I do remember.
Yeah. So one of the things that you were expressing that really resonated, and I'll just share this, and I do have to run, but because I could speak about what you just said all day. The romanticization of love, and people not saying I love you enough, right? Yeah. Just from a space of not that romantic space, just saying it for the sake of saying it because it's reality. If anyone takes anything from this chat today in relation to their channel, it's starting with that, right? Start saying I love you to more people, right? Yeah. With no expectation, no attachment, no like we're going to get into some kind of relationship. No, just say I love you because it's true.
Yeah. And because it's a wonderful vibration to share with someone.
Yes. Yeah. All right, my friends, my heart is full. I love you very much. Thank you for spending time with me. Thank you for adding your voice. Beautiful souls out there in the podcast world. I hope you got a lot of value out of this today. I hope it helped you open your channel. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone that could get the same sort of value. Maybe your mom, maybe your dad, maybe your friend that is having a hard time at the moment, understanding concepts like this and need a bit of support to take the step. Share with that person, because who knows what one click of the button could do. With that, I'm wishing all of you a wonderful evening, morning, afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Both Claudia and I love you very much, and we'll catch you next time here on the Cosmic Love Antenna. Bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Cosmic Love Antenna podcast. We hope you enjoyed. Be sure to follow Harrison on Instagram, Twitter, and Clubhouse at Harrison Ma. That's Harrison, Meagher.